can still get a taste of the old country in Mount Morris, Michigan, where folks work hard and enjoy the simple pleasures of life between the coasts. But when a late-night road trip ends with a blast from a shotgun,
I still think it's somebody he knew. It's always the person that you least suspect.
Mount Morris finds itself in the middle of a very modern mystery.
Girl, you can find anything on the internet.
It wouldn't be Sunday night in Mount Morris without a big slice of heaven from Big Brutus Family Restaurant. Owner Cindy Fowler relies on a healthy takeout traffic to support her business.
Our customers are mainly people in the local area that have been coming in here a long time.
But one night, one patron's order goes unclaimed.
Well, Bruce Miller was one of our regular customers. They ordered every Sunday night.
But by the end of the dinner rush, there's still no sign of Bruce.
After quite some time, Cherie Miller called and asked if the dinner had been picked up, and we said that it hadn't.
It seems Bruce hasn't turned up at home either.
She sounded a little frantic, very uneasy, like she knew there was something wrong.
Deputy David Krish is just starting his second shift when he catches a 911 call from dispatch.
The call came in from 911 as a possible shooting at the B&D Auto Market that was located on North Saginaw Street.
It's the same junkyard where Bruce Miller has worked for years.
We don't know when we're coming up what to expect. Are the suspects still there? If there was one suspect or multiple suspects, could it be a possible ambush?
Gun drawn, Deputy Krish enters the building.
As we opened up the door, we noticed that there was no forced entry or anything like that. We had made entry into the building, checking the area, make sure it was secured for us. And we came around the counter, and that's when we had noticed that there was a subject in a pool of blood.
Bruce Miller has sustained a gunshot wound to the neck.
One of our paramedics had checked the subject, see if he had any vitals or anything like that, but he was dead.
A routine day in Mount Morris has ended in horror. One order will never be claimed. Bruce Miller has been murdered. There's nothing more unpleasant to wake up to than news of murder, and everyone has a freshly brewed opinion.
He worked at an auto repair shop, had a junkyard, some shady characters walking in and out of there.
I've never heard of anything ever remotely good ever coming out of a junkyard.
Meanwhile, Bruce's sister-in-law, Judy, struggles to understand why such a decent man would be cut down by a heartless act of violence.
He was kind of like a big brother to me. You always say, it's never going to happen to my family. and then, you find out that, well, it can happen to your family.
To the rest of Mount Morris, Bruce was everyone's favorite mechanic. And that's got Bruce's fellow car junkies trying to get a fix on what happened.
Bruce has lived around here his whole life. I can't imagine why someone would want to kill him.
Yeah, it's a shame to kill a guy over a few $100.
You'd be surprised how well he did over that junkyard. I already kept quite a bit of money over there.
Why? What, was he too lazy to go down to the bank?
Nah, he's a hard worker. Maybe a little too trusting.
Did Bruce pay for his trusting ways with his life? When tough times fall on small towns, it can be a big mistake to keep a fat wad of cash in your back pocket.
Everyone thought it was drug dealers or just a robbery. There's hard times around here because of the GM closings.
But over at the Mount Morris Police Department, Detective Shanlin is already developing a different theory.
There was no forced entry into the business. The rest of the business was not rifled. They were looking for a safe or looking for a cash drawer.
And why would they? Turns out, Bruce had his own method of safeguarding his money.
In talking to family members and employees of the business, we learned that Bruce, instead of using a cash register, would make his change out of his pocket. Bruce was known to carry around $2,000. That money was missing.
When you spend your days in a junkyard, it's best to be cautious about the colleagues you keep.
Whoever did this, there was going to be a good connection directly to Bruce. Someone that they knew if they left Bruce alive, they would come back to identify him.
There's a killer walking the streets of Mount Morris, and he's getting away with murder. start of deer hunting season in Mount Morris, Michigan. It's barrels of fun for the boys, but for the girls, it's known as Widow's Weekend. And ever since the murder of Bruce Miller, all the local ladies wish their husbands and their weapons would stay closer to home.
So what do you think of, like, who could have done this? I don't know. One of the things that I heard was that it could be someone that maybe worked for him.
I heard that the guy had a grudge against Bruce because he fired him recently.
It looks like this case is going to have more twists than a Bavarian breadstick. Detectives Kevin Shanlin and Ives Petrovka are convinced that Bruce's killer was no stranger to the junkyard.
There got to be somebody that knows him. Who would know that the victim's going to be carrying the cash in his pocket other than employees or maybe a very frequent customer?
An even more chilling picture of Bruce's last night starts to come into focus.
It looks like they just came in and smoked him. No going from room to room, no looking for a safe. It just looks like this was a killing and the robbery was to throw us off.
The investigation into Bruce Miller's murder has taken a dramatic turn.
It just didn't add up that this was just your everyday, normal robbery. Whoever was involved in this was comfortable to know that Bruce would have the money in his pocket and not to look anywhere else in the business for money.
Bruce's death is looking more like a well-planned murder. And in a town where everyone knows everyone, everyone knew Bruce as a kind and generous boss. But his sister-in-law, Judy, knows that not all his employees were model citizens.
Bruce had a lot of guys that worked for him that were a little down on their luck, and so he would help them out and maybe lend them, you know, a few dollars.
Perhaps Bruce's generosity was his undoing. Detectives decide to dig up more information on Bruce's employees.
And that's where the name John Hutchinson arose.
And according to his co-workers, John Hutchinson was not quite in the running for Employee of the Month.
This was a person that was a former employee of Bruce's and owed Bruce $3,000, and they had been feuding for several months.
$3,000? Sounds like a motive.
And his brother, Harold Hutchinson, was currently still working at the business. Both John and Harold Hutchinson were known to be tough characters.
But are they tough enough to take out the boss? Local girls Chelsea and Marguerite know that the Hutchinson boys have more than axle grease beneath their fingernails.
I can't believe someone would kill their boss over a few $1,000s.
Well, you never know what drives people to do things. Some people get so desperate.
Maybe they were into something more serious, and Bruce caught wind of what was going down in the junkyard.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy down there.
A junkyard is like a cemetery for cars.
And whatever happened, I mean, those two weren't the smoothest of criminals.
And in Mount Morris, an aspiring criminal had better be smoother than a freshly painted fingernail. Especially if Detective Shanlin is hot on your heels.
We arrived at Harold Hutchinson's trailer.
And Harold isn't expecting company.
We knock on the door. We don't get an answer at first. We hear people moving around in the trailer as if they possibly were trying to hide something.
Is he tidying up or trying to hide something?
Harold comes to the door when I explained to him that we're investigating the death of Bruce Miller. And at that point, Harold Hutchinson dropped to his knees, started crying out loudly, almost like a child in a tantrum.
But Detective Shanlin isn't fooled by Harold's crocodile tears.
As soon as I confronted him with that, he stood right up and said, "Well, I might have heard about it already."
Fortunately for police, Harold can't keep a secret. He spills the beans about a strange phone call he received from his brother John the night before.
John Hutchinson says, "You don't have to worry about Bruce Miller anymore. You're taken care of for life."
And that could only mean one thing.
He believed that statement was John Hutchinson's way of saying that he had killed Bruce Miller.
Betrayed by a brother. Wonder how that will go over at the next family reunion. It's all beginning to fall together.
John was the guy. Everyone said he not only was capable of doing this, but he probably was the person who did it.
But if investigators think the motive for murder is a mere $3,000 debt, they've got another thing coming. Isn't brotherhood grand? You can build cars together, fish together, and you're there for each other through thick and thin. Unless, of course, your brother is Harold Hutchinson. who has fingered his brother John in the murder of Bruce Miller.
He said that he knew that John and Bruce were feuding, so the more he talked, the more I was convinced that John Hutchinson had something to do with this homicide.
It looks like this small-time crook has himself on the hook for a big-time murder. In Michigan, what you drive is as important as how you look. So Chelsea and Marguerite know that maintenance is paramount. And if you're trying to get away with murder, it's the attention to detail that counts.
In this rough economy, so many people do all kinds of things just to make money.
You gotta wonder what else Bruce might be keeping in his junkyard. Maybe Hutchinson was after more than just cash.
Well, you know what they say, one man's trash is another man's treasure.
And Bruce had both. Police hightail it to Hutchinson's home on the outskirts of the county.
The quicker we could get John Hutchinson, the quicker we could preserve any forensic evidence that may be at his residence.
And investigators' fast action pays off. Upon entering John Hutchinson's home, they find another crucial piece of the puzzle.
Right in his bedroom out in plain view was a shotgun.
Police bring Hutchinson and his guns down to the sheriff's department for closer inspection.
Upon interviewing John Hutchinson back at the sheriff's department, he denied any involvement in this homicide at all. However, his denials were extremely weak. Basically, so soft they're almost like whispers that he wasn't involved.
And as everyone knows, body language speaks louder than words.
An innocent person would be yelling back at you that I didn't do this murder.
It's not looking good for Harold's little brother. And the proof may lie in the guns taken from Hutchinson's house.
So this is the type of weapon we're looking for.
They match what we believe is the caliber of the gun that killed Bruce.
But it's not all cut and dry.
We've had the crime lab look at these, though, and it doesn't look like these guns have been recently fired.
And there's another problem.
We had the crime lab go through John's house, too. We found no blooded clothing, no clothing that appeared to have gunshot residue.
Is it possible that John may not have been involved?
We have nothing really to tie John or Harold to the crime scene evidence-wise at this point.
It's a crushing blow to the investigation. Police are forced to release their prime suspect.
Any homicide investigator will tell you, you can't cram a puzzle piece in to make it fit. If you do, innocent people are going to get locked up.
And John Hutchinson is free to go. In Michigan, the months can pass slowly, especially in a small town when there's a killer on the loose and no arrest in sight.
It just seemed to be such a mystery that there was no clues whatsoever. They had no leads, nowhere to go.
And it's hard not to wonder just what the grieving widow, Cherie Miller, has been up to through all this.
It's always the person that you least suspect.
I guess. How's his wife taking it?
I heard she went out dancing.
Dancing?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
She's a stronger person than I am.
I don't know about her.
The whispers about poor Cherie continue to roll through town as winter settles on Michigan. But if you ask Judy, idle speculation does little to catch a killer.
I think there was some frustration on everybody's part. You know, you just don't hear about those kind of things.
It appears as if this case is as frozen as Lake St. Clair in the middle of January. But a mysterious phone call from 1,000 miles away is about to break the ice on this cold case.
I was personally contacted by an attorney in Kansas City, Missouri. Asked me if I had an unsolved murder at a junkyard, and was the victim's name Bruce Miller.
This attorney is in possession of a piece of luggage that Detective Shanlin may find most intriguing.
And he said that he had a briefcase, and he believed that that suitcase had information that would help solve our case.
The case belonged to a former homicide detective named Jerry Cassidy. The late Jerry Cassidy.
Jerry Cassidy had committed suicide in this residence in Odessa, Missouri.
And deep inside Jerry's suitcase lies a shocking confession.
And there was a suicide letter addressed to Jerry Cassidy's family. In that letter, it spelled it right out that Jerry Cassidy had come to Michigan, had killed Bruce Miller.
It seems Mount Morris detectives have found their killer.
That letter showed that Jerry Cassidy was a murderer.
But what's the connection between this ex-cop from Missouri and Michigan businessman Bruce Miller? And what could have convinced Jerry Cassidy to pull the trigger not just on Bruce, but on himself as well? That's coming up next. A letter from beyond the grave has changed everything in the murder of Bruce Miller. Former police officer Jerry Cassidy has confessed to the killing in a suicide note. And there's another bombshell in his briefcase.
In this briefcase, he had found an instant message dated on the night before our homicide. That instant message was a script for how the murder was to occur.
Just who was the cyber scribe behind this deadly script?
That instant message appeared to be a conversation between a Cherie 1013 and Jerry Cassidy.
Cherie 1013? Could it be Bruce's very own wife, the widowed Cherie Miller?
Upon reading that instant message, we were able to determine that Cherie Miller and Jerry Cassidy were involved in some type of relationship.
Detectives move quickly and seize Jerry's computer.
We took Jerry Cassidy's computer and we had it forensically examined by Sergeant Petrovka. He was able to spit out thousands of emails.
The email is what really told the story of the seduction.
The story of the seduction of Jerry Cassidy through sex, lies, and amateur videotape.
We found 2 video movies that were labeled for Jerry's eyes only.
But hooking Jerry is only the first part of Cherie's wicked plan.
She sends him pictures. She's a Mary Kay cosmetic person. She makes up herself to be beat.
Cherie convinces Jerry that her husband is abusive and that she is in grave danger.
In this suicide letter, Jerry claims that Cherie Miller had twins that were Jerry's and that Bruce Miller had beat her so severely that she lost these babies.
Which we later learned was pretty impossible because she'd had a tubal ligation several years before.
It's all part of an elaborate tale used to manipulate Cherie's long-distance lover.
Cherie Miller had inflamed Jerry Cassidy so much with these lies that she was telling about Bruce Miller that he got it in his mind that he was going to do the right thing and come and kill Bruce Miller.
And so Jerry steps in to save his damsel in distress.
Jerry Cassidy follows her orders right to the T. He wants to be the avenger.
Detective Petrovka is able to retrace the killer's steps the night of the murder.
So Jerry drove here from Odessa, Missouri, drove into the B&D junkyard, parked right where he was told to park, went in with a shotgun, killed Bruce Miller, got back in his car, and drove away. Just as the instant message planned.
And now, the lack of forensic evidence found at the scene suddenly all makes sense.
Jerry Cassidy, being ex-law enforcement, knew how to not leave evidence. He knew what he could touch and what he couldn't touch.
And once Jerry does her bidding, Cherie 1013 signs off for good. It's a fateful decision.
Cherie Miller's biggest mistake was dumping her boyfriend, dumping Jerry Cassidy.
Heartbroken and racked with guilt, Jerry Cassidy takes his own life. But not before spilling the beans on his online buddy. And to Mount Morris residents, news that makeup lady Cherie Miller masterminded the attack is on everyone's lips.
Oh, it sounds like Cherie had a whole secret life.
And she must have had him wrapped around her little finger in order to get him to kill for her. She's like some kind of siren. What I don't understand is, what did she think was going to happen when she dumped him?
Where do these people find each other anyway?
Girl, you can find anything on the internet.
But first, investigators have to find this cyber siren, and it seems she's already logged out of Mount Morris.
She was no longer in Michigan at this point. She was on a vacation in Reno, Nevada with her new boyfriend.
Police organize a welcome home party for Cherie at the airport.
And we wait until they fly back into Flint, Michigan, and arrest her when she gets off the plane.
The jet-setting murder suspect is taken in for questioning.
She believed that she could have Bruce killed and then inherit all this stuff, the business, collect Social Security, collect his GM pension, collect his life insurance.
Instead, all she got was the book.
Cherie Miller was charged with premeditated first-degree murder in our circuit court here in Genesee County.
After a lengthy trial, Cherie Miller is convicted and sentenced to life without parole.
This case was the first case that I'd been involved in where we could prove that a person used a computer to commit a homicide.
With the case closed, Mount Morris residents can finally take a deep sigh of relief.
God, you know, you just gotta think what kind of a person does this. Gets her husband killed, pretends that she's been beaten. It's really just shameless. It's disgusting.
She's got a lot of blood on her hands, and I hope she stays in jail for a long, long time.
And now, Bruce's friends must come to terms with the evil in their midst.
Oh, I think everyone was just mortified that someone lived among us that could stoop to the level that she did.
Cherie is like a chameleon. I don't even know if she knows who the real Cherie is.
She'll have plenty of time to figure that out in prison. When it comes to cars, one person's trash is another person's treasure. And so it can be with love. When hearts are thrown on the scrap heap, a happy ending is the rarest find of all. You can still get a taste of the old country in Mount Morris, Michigan, where folks work hard and enjoy the simple pleasures of life between the coasts. But when a late-night road trip ends with a blast from a shotgun,
I still think it's somebody he knew. It's always the person that you least suspect.
Mount Morris finds itself in the middle of a very modern mystery.
Girl, you can find anything on the internet.
It wouldn't be Sunday night in Mount Morris without a big slice of heaven from Big Brutus Family Restaurant. Owner Cindy Fowler relies on a healthy takeout traffic to support her business.
Our customers are mainly people in the local area that have been coming in here a long time.
But one night, one patron's order goes unclaimed.
Well, Bruce Miller was one of our regular customers. They ordered every Sunday night.
But by the end of the dinner rush, there's still no sign of Bruce.
After quite some time, Cherie Miller called and asked if the dinner had been picked up, and we said that it hadn't.
It seems Bruce hasn't turned up at home either.
She sounded a little frantic, very uneasy, like she knew there was something wrong.
Deputy David Krish is just starting his second shift when he catches a 911 call from dispatch.
The call came in from 911 as a possible shooting at the B&D Auto Market that was located on North Saginaw Street.
It's the same junkyard where Bruce Miller has worked for years.
We don't know when we're coming up what to expect. Are the suspects still there? If there was one suspect or multiple suspects, could it be a possible ambush?
Gun drawn, Deputy Krish enters the building.
As we opened up the door, we noticed that there was no forced entry or anything like that. We had made entry into the building, checking the area, make sure it was secured for us, and we came around the counter, and that's when we had noticed that there was a subject in a pool of blood.
Bruce Miller has sustained a gunshot wound to the neck.
One of our paramedics had checked the subject, see if he had any vitals or anything like that, but he was dead.
A routine day in Mount Morris has ended in horror. One order will never be claimed. Bruce Miller has been murdered. There's nothing more unpleasant to wake up to than news of murder, and everyone has a freshly brewed opinion.
He worked at an auto repair shop, had a junkyard, you know, some shady characters walking in and out of there.
I've never heard of anything ever remotely good ever coming out of a junkyard.
Meanwhile, Bruce's sister-in-law, Judy, struggles to understand why such a decent man would be cut down by a heartless act of violence.
He was kind of